Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Monica Trauzi. With me today is Dr. Margo Thorning, Senior Vice President and Chief Economist at the American Council for Capital Formation. Margo, it's nice to see you again.
Nice to see you.
Margo, the legislative battle on climate may be over for the time being, but the wheels are turning on EPA regulation unless Congress is able to halt it at some point this fall. We're going to see regulation as early as March of next year. What do you believe will be the immediate economic impacts of such regulation?
I think if Congress doesn't intervene and does allow EPA to go ahead starting January 2nd, 2011, to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from major emitters, I think there will be a definite slowdown in new projects and investment spending. The business community already faces major sources of uncertainty, what with the health care bill, the financial reform bill, the prospect of the Bush tax cuts going away, prospect of higher corporate taxes, the very large looming federal deficits, and then to add on the uncertainty of what it may mean if EPA does require changes in technology, mandates a best available technology that might not exist. All of those factors add to the hurdle rate that a company will need in order to make new investment. And people are probably aware that investment spending is what has really dragged down our economic growth rate since the fourth quarter of 2007. Investment spending has fallen by about $330 billion this past quarter compared to the fourth quarter of 2007. So when we add more uncertainty to business making decisions, it requires a higher hurdle rate, meaning fewer and fewer projects will meet that hurdle rate. So it will impede U.S. economic recovery and slow job growth to have EPA's regulation of greenhouse gases starting in January of 2011.
But we do have this issue of climate change. What do we do, just not address it?
No, I think most people think climate change is a serious issue and it needs to be addressed through a global initiative. For example, the Asia-Pacific Partnership that was started back in 2005 has gone forward with initiatives to trade best available technology on coal mining, steel making, aluminum production, electricity production, renewable energies. We need to work together globally to reduce the amount of CO2 emissions per dollar of output. And the U.S. is doing a pretty good job at doing that. So climate change certainly needs to continue to be researched. We could continue to need to spend money on new technologies to try to be able to capture and store carbon, to develop nuclear energy, to develop new energy sources. So it's an issue, but there are other very important issues like job growth and economic recovery that we need to keep our eye on.
Politically, why do you think cap and trade failed in the Senate this year?
Because most people realized, and a host of studies showed, including one by the ACCF and the Small Business Entrepreneurial Council, we modeled the impact of the Kerry-Lieberman bill and saw that by 2030, when all the permits were no longer being given away, we would have between 1.4 and 1.9 million fewer jobs, depending on whether our high-cost or low-cost case occurred. And we would see GDP slower by between 1.3 and 1.7%. It was going to reduce jobs, it was going to slow growth, and as EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson admitted, it won't help the environment unless developing countries take strong steps to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So it was just seen as a factor that would hinder our recovery, not help it.
So the other option for the Senate here heading into the fall is to pass some kind of energy package, perhaps an energy light package. What do you think the prospects for that are?
I would guess they're not real high because people are also realizing that renewable energy, for example, a renewable energy package, will require substituting more expensive energy. Wind and solar are more expensive because they have to be backed up by conventional generation, which has to run all the time. So it's more expensive per kilowatt hour to mandate renewable portfolio standards. And in this weak economy and faltering recovery, I think proponents of those programs will probably want to go slowly. So I would think it's unlikely we'll see much legislation come out of either this session or a lame duck session.
But when we're talking about economic recovery and jobs growth, doesn't it make sense to put money and efforts behind green job creation?
Well, unfortunately, a lot of green jobs are low-paying, and what happens when you substitute, let's say, solar or wind energy for natural gas or nuclear or coal is that you're making energy more expensive for all the people in the area, which means a manufacturing company that's energy intensive may find its product is no longer competitive and it may have to close down. So you might pick up some green jobs, but you will lose, as our Carrie Lieberman study show, you will lose jobs overall, and you will find that carbon leaks out of the U.S. and manufacturing facilities abroad who have weaker standards than ours will pick up the slack. So you'll probably have a negative impact on greenhouse gas emissions.
Senator Lisa Murkowski conceded her seat in the race for Senate in Alaska last week. If she's unable to regain that seat in some other way, how do you think her absence in the Senate is going to impact the climate debate and, in particular, efforts to stop EPA regulation?
Well, she was clearly a leader in that effort, but I would suppose if Miller does take that seat, that he would probably want to continue that effort since he himself is on record as having concerns about cap-and-trade legislation. So I don't think the effort will die. And then you have Senator Rockefeller, who's also very concerned. And it wouldn't surprise me if quite a few members, having come back from being with their constituents, decide that it would be the wiser thing to delay the implementation of EPA regulation.
Where do you think the discourse on climate and cap-and-trade stands at this point in the United States? Is cap-and-trade dead with this latest failure? It's failed a few times before.
Well, it's hard to say dead. I think the issue is probably going to be on the back burner because Americans with 9.6 unemployment rate, economic growth rate of 1.3% last quarter, I think the last thing most people want is higher energy prices, and it's become pretty clear to most people that a cap-and-trade bill, it's designed to raise energy prices to make you use less of it. So I think it's, if perhaps not dead, but certainly not going to be the first thing that members of Congress want to address.
So what signal are you looking for in the economy then in order for it to be the right time for cap-and-trade or some type of climate legislation?
Well, I think we need to see economic growth a lot stronger before we'd put in place something that would mandate greenhouse gas emission reductions. I think until the unemployment rate is steadily heading down, toward 6% or 5%, and economic growth is ticking along at, say, 3%, I think most people would be concerned about the impact of imposing mandatory controls or higher energy prices. So I think it will be a while before that debate is taken up again.
Okay, we'll end it there. Thank you for coming on the show. Nice to see you again. And thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.